Hello, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Summer Vacation Tips for Kids Who Struggle. We're excited to share these tips to help your family have a relaxing and hopefully happy vacation together this summer. Before we get started, I wanted to share a few housekeeping items. Okay, first we will be recording the webinar. It will be sent out to all who registered so you can view it anytime on demand after this. Secondly, we'll be answering questions at the end of this webinar, so please feel free to put your questions in the chat box as they come up. At any time you think of something, we will get to them at the very end. We'll do our best to answer as many questions as possible with time permitting. I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce today's speakers. First, you'll be hearing from Rebecca Jackson, who is our Vice President of Programs and Outcomes for Brain Balance Achievement Centers. Rebecca brings heart, knowledge, and firsthand experience working with over 1,000 students as she served as Executive Director for multiple Brain Balance Centers. Second, today, you'll be hearing from Holly Larson, who's a registered dietitian and Director of Nutrition for Brain Balance. As Director of Nutrition for Brain Balance, Holly has designed our Balance 360 clean eating system, and Holly also manages our online support community of almost, I checked today, 9,000 parents. She has so much experience in aiding families, specifically on making healthy food choices on vacations. These are questions that we receive a lot from families, so we're really excited to get into both of these topics. And with that, I will pass it along to Rebecca Jackson.
Thanks, Victoria. I also have to mention so much of when Holly and I were planning this and talking about it and thinking about it, not only am I sharing what I know from the perspective of brain balance, but from the real life perspective of, I also have a 9-year-old and an 11-year-old. So I feel like a lot of what I'm sharing today were like things gone wrong of, life lessons and learn from me. So hopefully we'll have you have some great takeaways that you can walk away from and implement for that next swell family bonding time.
So Becca, I'm going to go back and show us the overview slide.
Oh, sure.
We can go over that.
Okay, thanks. So, the first question is, why is it that family vacations can be a stressful time? And then we want to cover how to prepare and structure your vacation for optimal success, why good nutrition matters for children and adults, whether we struggle or not, nutrition is key, and especially on a time when we're off schedule, off routine, that becomes even more important rather than less important. And then just some tips for healthy food choices and being prepared and organized while traveling. So those are our high overview pieces today. So just real quick, who we are at Brain Balance is we are a program that's focused on helping all kids do better. We all have areas of strength and weakness, but the problem is if we have multiple areas of challenge, it can be harder and harder to work around to be successful. And what we know is good healthy development leads to good attention and focus and good behavior and success with academics and social pieces. So the kids that we work with have gaps and holes in different aspects of development, making some of these pieces that really we take for granted more complicated. So our goal is to help all kids do better and to really live up to their potential. So why is it that kids can really struggle on family vacations, and why is it that a child that struggles with areas like attention and focus or behavior, why can vacations be even more stressful? One of the things that we have to remember is the more mature we are, and I don't mean like, are we 65 and aging, but the more age appropriate our development is, and the further along we are with development, the better our brain and body does with tolerating stress. So if you think of a brand new baby, when a baby's first born, they come out kicking and screaming and rapid heartbeat and rapid breathing. That's a really stressed out system. And the more we mature, the more we develop, the better our body becomes at managing, tolerating, and modulating stress. So if I have a young child that's 6 years of age, and if that child has some aspects of complicated development, it's going to be even more challenging for that child to modulate stress. And so we're going to see a bigger impact on that. And think about the aspects, we think of family vacation as a fun time, and it should be, but think of what a family vacation entails. You know, if we picture Disney World, think of the massive volumes of sensory input of Disney World. Everywhere you look, there's sights, there's smells, there's noise, you're hot and sweaty. It's something different from the normal routine. It's a ton of walking, a ton of standing around. You don't know what's coming next. You're about to go on a ride. Is it going to be a scary ride, a noisy ride? Then there's all the things that go along with it of getting a family ready to go and out the door, getting people fed on time, and then you've got the whole scenario of, you know, siblings in a small space together, not harassing one another. So it boils down to a moment where on every single family vacation, there's going to be times of stress and crabbiness for all people involved, including the parents. But just keeping in mind that these things are even more stressful for our kids than what they are for us, because the more mature we are, the better we tolerate these things. So our kids are less mature than we are developmentally. And again, if there's any additional impact or gap and hole in their development, it's going to amplify these things, not minimize them. So just real quick, again, just touching on that idea of that ideal development is going to give us increase with tolerance and control. Development is something when we look at our brain that really happens from the bottom up and then forward. So it starts in the back of our neck, and as the brain is engaged and fired, we start to build networks and pathways. So the more we develop networks and pathways that eventually come up to the frontal part of our brain, which is where we have attention and focus, good decision making, our higher levels of functioning. So that's often referred to as executive function pieces. So when you have an 8-year-old, we don't expect an 8-year-old to have very high levels of executive functioning. And that's for an 8-year-old that's typically developing. So again, this is just showing that development happens from the bottom up. There is a particular set of steps involved with development leading towards success. So again, all development is building those networks and pathways, giving us better control. But good development is also break and impulse control. So the more mature we are in our development, the better we are with modulation, with inhibition. So a great example of that would be, we all have moments of frustration. I travel sometimes for work, and one of the things when I get home from traveling, all I want is a smoothie. So after eating meals out for a long time, I just want a good green smoothie. And so the other day I got home, it had been a long trip. I go to make a smoothie and we're out of coconut milk and frozen bananas. And I literally wanted to like throw myself down on the floor and say, you know, oh, I just want a smoothie. But because I try to be a mature adult, it came out just more as like a, the caught my son's attention. He was like, Mom, what's wrong? But I was able to modulate even in a time when I was exhausted, I was irritable, I was frustrated, I could rein it in. But when we have a child that doesn't have executive function developed, or they have gaps and holes, so it's harder for them to develop that, it's going to be harder to rein it in to be age appropriate in those moments of frustration. So again, it takes really great healthy development to have attention and focus and have the ability to control yourself in those moments of frustration and upset. Another thing that I think is so important to keep in mind is every brain is not the same. I know how I see things and how things smell and taste and feel to me, but I actually don't have any idea how those experiences are for my kids. We assume that every brain hears and sees things the same. Our only experience is our own brain, and so it's easy to assume that we all experience things the same way. We don't. There's aspects of these pieces of development that change over time as our brain matures. So one example is the way we hear things. The more mature we are with our auditory processing, the better we are at blocking out background noise and filtering things. So I can be in the car listening to music, my kids can be talking in the background, and I can have a conversation with my husband. If we switch it and I'm trying to tell my daughter something or my son something that's in the back third row of the car, and the radio's on and my husband's talking, and I'm trying to tell my son, hey, put your shoes on, we're about to stop, who needs to go to the bathroom? It's going to be harder for his brain to take in and hear that information, because he's going to have less of an ability with a less mature brain to block and filter. So why that's relevant is when we're putting our kids in a scenario like Disney World, where it's light and sound and motion and movement, that's even more fatiguing to their brain than it is to our brain. Our mature brain has a natural buffer system. And so I'm not having to process every single visual thing that I'm seeing. My brain has an ability to buffer and tune out the information that isn't important and relevant. But if I'm less mature than age appropriate in the way I process visual information or auditory information, my brain is actually having to work harder. So we all have a different experience with what we see and what we hear. For some of our kids, they're amplified in what they feel or hear. So those might be pathways that the brain is perceiving things too much. So it's like the volume is turned up for them. And when that happens, they also, again, have less of an ability to block out background noise. So if something is stimulating and overwhelming to us, we have to assume that our kid's brain feels the same, if not more so. And we also know that when the brain is working hard, it's going to fatigue at a faster point. And so if you yourself are getting to a point where you're on sensory overload and you're tired, you have to assume that your kid is long past that point. So really keeping in mind that your experience of things is going to be different than your child's experience. And so being aware of that and thinking that through in the planning. And again, your child's brain is going to fatigue at a faster point than your brain. So this is just showing, again, development happens in a very particular order, leading to success with good decision making, with break and impulse control, with modulating and monitoring and managing stress and frustration. So for the child, if there's any gaps and holes in development, if they need more in the way of redirection to stay on task with something, if they do become more overwhelmed by sensory input, those are red flags that we probably have gaps and holes in that development. So we know that that child's brain is going to fatigue even faster. So we want to be aware of that when we're setting expectations and planning family time and family vacation. So the first idea is kids need structure, and the reality is adults do too. We all do best when we've got a plan and we know what to expect and what's coming. Structure gives you something to look forward to. It gives you an opportunity to manage your time. And this is something that if you're staying with friends or family, this is a great thing to address ahead of time to set things up for success. So if you're going to stay with a family for a couple of days, letting them know, hey, a couple things just to let you know, when my child gets really tired or after a long day, he's going to need some downtime on himself. So please don't take it personally if he's not wanting to play after dinner. He might just need some quiet time to regroup after a day of being out in the sun and lots of stimulation. Giving a heads up on what they eat. And this isn't being a demanding guest. This is just saying, hey, I want to set things up so this trip goes as well as it can, bringing along a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old or whatever the kids' age are. So give the host a heads up of, hey, these are things that really help. If it's food pieces, we often bring a ton of our own food along. And so that way I don't have to put the pressure on the host. We don't eat gluten. It's my son cannot. And so rather than expecting a family to understand what that means, we always have alternatives along with us so that we can manage that in a stress-free way. Giving a heads up that even though we're on vacation, hey, we're really going to try to stick close to our 8 p.m. bedtime routine, because we know if we're off sleep schedule that the kids tend to get really tired and crabby the next day, and we want to be able to enjoy our time with you. So we're still going to try to stick to that 8 o'clock schedule. So you can still do it in a way where you're not seeming like a total stick in the mud. But again, you're thinking these things through to set your kids up for success, because if the kids aren't having a fun time, neither are the adults. And again, the whole idea of have a plan, but be flexible. Nothing ever goes the way it's planned all the time. And so having a plan, having food prepped and some organization, but being fluid and flexible enough to go with the flow. So if what you have prepped for lunch doesn't sound good to anybody, being fluid and flexible enough to go with plan B and not having it totally derail you, because if it derails you, mom, then it's going to tend to derail the whole family. This is the don't overschedule piece. I struggle with this, especially, if we're going to someplace that we haven't been before. I like to read about it. I like to look at Pinterest boards of things to do. And I tend to be a pretty high energy, want to fit lots of things in. But we have to remember our kids fatigue faster than we do, and they need still some boundaries and schedule. And so if I overdo it, it backfires with the whole family. So a couple simple things. If you don't have to be somewhere first thing in the morning, don't rush to get out the door. And maybe you're rushing to get out the door 1 or 2 of the days on vacation, but not every single day. Sometimes we need time to just ease into the day, whether it's myself as an adult or the kids. And so don't have every day where you're starting the day with, come on, wake up, hurry up, let's go, let's go, let's go. That's not fun for anybody. Allow your family ample time to get out the door. And my daughter is one that she's very diligent. She's really sweet, great behavior, but she moves at the pace of a turtle. And nothing changes that. No amount of yelling or bribery or motivation. And so we do best when we take that into account with planning, and we don't do well enough doing that. We tend to rush, 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 rush. So again, to have the whole family start the day in a good mood, working backwards. We should have our daughter get up and start getting ready before anybody else gets out of bed, so that the hope is she's ready by the time the entire rest of the family gets ready as well. Kids need downtime. We all need downtime. And so don't put yourself in a scenario where you're running from activity to activity to activity. Build quiet time in there. Even if it's you're going to go to a park and everybody's going to bring a book along, or just be where it's not a structured activity, allow for non-structured downtime as well, whether it's beginning of the day, middle of the day, end of the day, a little bit of everything. Allow yourself time to just be, and to be in the moment and not be rushing the entire time, and don't overdo it. Everybody ends up tired and crabby when you do. For those of you who have listened to any of my other webinars, this is a personal picture. This is my son, Drew. And the poor kid, this is one of my favorite pictures of him. And I managed to work in it to many presentations. I don't even remember the exact scenario in this picture, to be honest. And Drew, this is from a couple years ago. Drew is now a lovely 9-year-old. And what's so funny about this picture is Drew overall is a pretty chill kid. But clearly, based on the car, you can see that we're overpacked. Clearly have been outside in the summer someplace, and knowing me, we pushed it too long. And we did this Father's Day the other day, and the 4 of us went to go play tennis together. We live in North Carolina. It was like 95 degrees and humid, and we went at 12:30. So we had a really great time, but my husband and I were having fun volleying back and forth. So the kids were done, and we pushed it because we were having fun and we wanted to stay a little bit longer. And so we did that just 10 more minutes, except for it was like 25 minutes. And we pushed it to the point that by the time we left to go get smoothies, the entire family was hot, sweaty, tired, crabby. And so those extra few minutes of fun for us did not end up being fun in the end. And I was laughing as it was happening, thinking, I need to work this tip into the presentation and learn from it myself. So again, read the cues. Is when the kids, if you're getting hot and sweaty, the kids are even more hot and sweaty. If you're starting to get crabby, chances are the kids are too. So staying ahead of it, don't push it those extra 10 minutes, because in the end, it's not fun. And when a child melts down, it's a long recovery time. When body goes into fight or flight, so when a child is really upset and they're melting down, the part of the brain that gives you logical conversation shuts down. So there's no amount of reasoning with the child in that moment. And it takes a healthy, well-developed body at least 20 minutes to shift out of that mode. So once you hit this breakdown point where Drew is, you've lost at least 20 minutes at a minimum before you can get back to normal, happy, functioning life. So stay ahead of the curve, not behind it. Another piece to keep in mind with family vacation is the impact of technology. There's so many cool apps, there's so many cool devices, educational ones, fun ones, but we really have to understand the impact of them. So while technology can be the ultimate babysitter for a kid, and it can be even an educational game, still comes at a price. When we're doing things on technology, there's massive amounts of visual stimulation that's happening, and it's activating the part of our brain that does short-term reward-driven pathways. So what I mean by that is when we're doing something like playing a video game, you're paying attention and then there's a reward. So you're trying to, kill the robot or scoop up a coin or whatever the video game is. Each time you successfully do something, you get rewarded, whether it's an image on the screen or you earn points. And that reward re-engages this particular network of attention and focus pathways. So when we're doing technology, it's not truly 2 hours of attention and focus. It is tiny little increments of attention and focus strung together with a reward system. These are different pathways than what we use for reading a book, mowing the lawn, working at our jobs. Most things in life don't have a reward system that comes bing, 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 bing. So we want to really be careful to not have our kids constantly spending hours and hours and hours building the parts of the brain that are expecting constant rewards. Things like social media are activating these same parts of the brain. So technology is not all bad. There's some really good and cool things that can come from technology, but we want to use it within balance and we want to understand what's happening. So when we're using lots of technology, it's impacting the reward-driven pathways in our brain, and it's highly taxing and fatiguing on the brain. So even though the kids are vegged out in the car playing video games with headphones on, so you're enjoying 2 hours of silence in the car, what you as a parent have to understand is when that technology gets turned off, their body hasn't moved for 2 hours and their brain has really worked and become stimulated. So when you turn it off, you are going to get negative behaviors and negative attitude. And so often parents think it's because the child's having fun and they don't want to turn off the video game. But when we're using our muscles, it engages the part of the brain that gives us break and impulse control, that gives us emotional regulation and behavior control. So when we're not using our muscles, we're turning off the parts of the brain that are social, that are engaging, that regulate and control behavior, and we're fatiguing other parts of the brain. So anytime, whether it's on vacation or not, your child is doing a huge chunk of technology, you are always going to be more likely to have really negative behaviors and attitudes directly after. So my point with this is if you are driving a couple hours to go to a family wedding and your kids have to be on perfect behavior, spending those 3 hours in the drive on video games is setting you up to have kids that are in a bad mood, that aren't going to cooperate, that aren't going to be nice to grandma and grandpa when they see them. And so use technology, but use it by thinking through, you know, if you're just going to go back to the hotel room and veg out and then go to bed, then maybe it's okay for them to do it for a little bit. I still wouldn't do 2 hours, but think through the more time they're spending on technology, the more they're fatiguing the brain and the more you're going to get negative behavior afterwards. So think through what comes next and decide if it's worth it or not. So you might have to get creative and, you know, do a combination of maybe the kids have to draw in the car for a little while before they do any technology. And maybe you get really cheesy and sing a song as a family if the kids are young enough, or play the alphabet game, or listen to a podcast. Our kids had a ton of fun a couple summers ago. We listened, this was several years ago now, but Beverly Cleary, we listened to a bunch of her books we did books on tape in the car. We've done Harry Potter. So there's a lot of things that the whole family can enjoy where you're listening rather than fatiguing the brain through technology. So then how we counter the impacts of technology on the brain is through movement. So again, when we engage our muscles, it wakes up the right hemisphere of the brain, and this is an oversimplification, but right brain is activated when we're using our large muscle groups, and right brain is involved with break and impulse control, how we handle ourselves when we're frustrated and upset. It's the social and engaging side of our brain. So if the kids are going to do a bunch of technology, then the second they turn it off, I would want to counter that with movement. And so if they've spent 2 hours on the video game, get to a park, have them run around and go move and play, race to the other side of the park and back. It doesn't have to be 45 minutes of movement, but get them to use their muscles to wake up and re-engage and kind of get the brain back on track. Another thing is, and we're all guilty of this, you know, we all want the fun Instagram photos. We did a day trip to the beach and I had this image in my head of, you know, fun, cute, bright beach colors, and the kids have wakeboards and getting not wakeboards, boogie boards, getting that, you know, perfect Instagram photo to kick off summer. And that's all fine and good. However, well, really, and you guys as parents will get this. We had a moment, we were at the beach years ago, and the kids were fishing, and they were sitting on the end of the dock, and it was this salt marsh grass and this gorgeous sky, and the kids were sitting there with fishing poles. And it was the most beautiful image from behind. So I went to grab my camera, but of course, by the time I got the camera, the kids were no longer in position. So I wanted to get them back into position. They were enjoying fishing. They didn't want to stand there and pose for mom. So it took tons of back and forth and tons of, come on guys, just 2 minutes, just do it. And then you can go back to fishing. In the end, I got my photo. And if you didn't know what was happening in the moment, it's a beautiful photo. But do you know, I hate that picture every time I see it, because what I see every time I see that picture is I let my desire for a cute photo ruin. It was a bad parenting moment of like, the kids were having fun fishing. I should have just let them be. And if my husband's listening to this webinar, he's totally rolling his eyes right now. But just, you know, the reality of we can get so many great pictures of our kids spontaneously. Sometimes we get a great family photo, but just remembering to be present, be in the moment. We're setting an example for our kids to follow. And sometimes the best memories are made not through our phones, but through interaction. Another piece is for out and about, I like the kids to have, clean faces and hair brushed and clothes on, but they're 11 and 9 and they love to play outside, which is awesome. And hair doesn't stay brushed for long. And so just reminding ourselves of, if anybody else is a parent, they get that it's hard to keep kids neat and clean and not completely disheveled looking, and that's okay. So just a reminder to yourself is if we as parents can go with it and be there in the moment and enjoy the time with our kids and capture the spontaneous photo rather than the posed photo, it often ends up being a better experience for everyone, because again, when we get crabby and frustrated, it impacts everyone around us. And then there's the Hangry experience. I was traveling for work recently, and there was a breakfast restaurant called Hangry, and I thought that was fantastic. That moment where you're so hungry that you can't even think. We all hit that moment, and when we're hungry, I have a hard time making a decision when I hit this point, and so our kids are the same way. And so again, for all of us, adults and kids alike, is we've got to stay ahead of this, because when one person in the family gets crabby, it impacts everybody. So really and truly, when you're planning a vacation, whether it's Disney or the beach, or just exploring your own town or going to the park, whatever it is, remember to think through, bring along more food than what you think you need. Plan more downtime, plan more time to get yourselves out the door so that you're able to just enjoy the moment. And I'm not going to steal Holly's thunder on the food and nutrition pieces, but just in the planning, give yourself time and read the kids' cues. One of the best advice I got from a parent who travels quite a bit with their kids and family is they brought their kids to Paris at a pretty young age, young being like later elementary school. But and I said, how did you do it? And she said, we went at their pace. We stopped a ton for pastries and ice creams. We didn't do all the museums that I wanted to do, but it was one of their favorite trips that they've ever done. And so they watched the kids for cues for when it was time to take a cab instead of walk, when it was time to stop at a cafe and just hang out for a little while, when it was time to call it a day. And so that's true for whatever the vacation is read your kids' cues, and probably your spouses and yourself as well, will set everybody up for the most success. All right, Holly, do you want to talk about the fun nutrition stuff now?
I do. So, Becca, I feel like I learn something new from you every time I hear you speak. So really great examples of why it's important to think through your vacation so that you can have plans in place that applies to technology and your time that you schedule and the time that you don't. And it also matters for our nutrition. So of course, I'm a dietitian. I think nutrition matters for everybody, but it's even more important for our kids who struggle academically, socially, behaviorally, as we work with here at Brain Balance. As a parent, it can be pretty confusing to know what we should be eating because the nutrition messages that we hear can contradict and they can change. So at Brain Balance, part of our program is helping families with nutrition so that they can get their best experience with program. So today we're going to talk about a couple of those aspects that we talk about with Brain Balance, so that you can have your best experience on vacation. Starting with hydration, going through planning meals and snacks so that your child isn't hungry 7 minutes later, and avoiding those foods that might actually be contributing to behavior challenges. So one of the keys to supporting our kiddos this summer is to make sure that they are well hydrated. If your kiddo is dehydrated, that can negatively impact your child's ability to focus, to run and play, and just feel their best in general. I know I feel groggy and not my best when I'm dehydrated, and it's exactly the same for your kiddo. But for your kiddo, especially those if you have a language issue, it can be difficult to express or understand what they're feeling. So it is something as parents to pay attention to. It can be easy to get behind on your water intake, especially in the heat of the summer. And kids are more vulnerable than adults to dehydration because they have more surface area. So make sure to pack everyone's favorite water bottles and to have water at their favorite temperature. If your child prefers lots of ice in their water, do it that way. If they like water at room temperature, do that. And to have those with you and to make sure to take breaks. With meals and snacks, it is important to have the right combination of carbohydrates, fats, and proteins all together. A lot of our kids with their sensory challenges tend to prefer those simple carbohydrates. I mean, we do too, as grown-ups. But when they focus on cookies and chips and noodles and pasta and drinks that are sweetened and crackers, that can set our kids up for a roller coaster with their blood sugars. We can have a big spike of blood sugar and have more active behavior, and then a crash in energy and emotion. So if we can choose carbohydrates that are more complex more often, like whole fruits instead of sweet drinks, for example, and to pair them with fats and proteins each time you have a meal and snack, not only will your child feel better, their behavior will be more moderate, and it will help them not to have that spike in blood sugar and then crash. The last piece is to look at what things are added to our foods. So child behavior and food have been found to be very closely linked. We can look at foods that could cause changes in their behavior, like ADHD, and that includes dyes and additives and things like that. So it can be really tempting to allow for treats while you're on vacation, but unfortunately you might be setting yourself up for challenging behaviors. Undesirable child behavior and food dyes are often related. So food dyes can be found in kind of sneaky places like cereal and juice and candy and so on. And hyperactivity and food dyes can be linked. So it's kind of unfortunate that in our country we allow a lot of additives and food dyes that actually are banned in other countries. And the other thing to pay attention to is sugar. Sugar is added to more foods and drinks than you would ever guess unless you start looking at food packages. And even foods that are pretty surprising to parents, like granola bars or yogurt, they may contain as much sugar as a candy bar or ice cream. So when our kids who struggle may prefer carbohydrates like pasta and potatoes and cereal and crackers, having an overabundance of these carbs with maybe other additives and without the proteins and fats, that can really set them on a behavior roller coaster. So everyone has their own limits for what stressors they can tolerate. Becca did a great job of explaining that earlier in the presentation, whether it's the heat, to your hunger, to being thirsty, to sensory input, or changes in behavior. And when you have a child who struggles, we can reach these limits sooner. It's kind of like reaching the edge of a cliff. We all have that point where we can be pushed over the cliff, it's too much or too far. So making sure that your child is fueled the right way and well hydrated, that sets everyone up for success to have the best possible vacation. So now I'd love to share a couple of tips and tricks with you of how to do this on your vacation. And as you guys have questions for Rebecca or I, please feel free to type them in. We'll be answering questions at the end, and only we can see what questions that you're typing in. So with that, here are a couple of healthy tips for making food choices easy while traveling. The most important is to be prepared. So not only being prepared with rules about your technology, alternatives to technology, things like that we looked at the beginning, we do need to think through our food. So one of the most important things is to have an expectation that the whole family follows and is communicated to the whole family. Pack lots of snacks. I'm going to give you lots of ideas on a couple of slides, and check out where your local grocery stores are. Not only can they be helpful for drinks and packaged snacks, but also easy to prepare foods, and I'm going to give you a couple of ideas. When you book your vacation, look around for local restaurants that would be fun and delicious and that might have healthy choices to support good behavior too. So whether that's visiting a new city or going to a theme park like Disneyland or going on a cruise, there are good options available, I promise. So chat with your children through menu options. Let them know what the guidelines are for eating out. And for example, if everyone in the family drinks water instead of soda, not only does that save you money, that could help prevent behavior issues as well. If you're staying with friends or family, make sure to communicate your expectations or guidelines so that you and the host can work together to have it be a good experience for everybody. And when everyone's on the same page and knows what to expect, that helps to minimize stress. Here are a few of my favorite snack ideas. I really love Lara bars. They're sweet, they feel like a treat, but they're actually just fruits and nuts kind of mushed together. A good example of pairing a carbohydrate with protein and fat is any fruit with almond butter or peanut butter. We see that at the bottom. Waffles are actually really fun to not only have for breakfast, but you can also turn them into a peanut butter sandwich. And it doesn't have to be complicated. Cut up fruit in a baggie or container, depending on what your traveling circumstances are, or frozen fruit like frozen grapes. Not only do they help cool you down, but they're simple and healthy. Beverages are something to think about too. So we want to focus on water most of the time and making sure we have enough water, but even I, the dietitian, would like to mix it up sometimes. So I love seltzer water. Spindrift is my favorite brand because it's sweetened with just a little bit of juice, but there are tons of options for seltzer water of all different flavors, and they don't have added sugar or artificial sweeteners or dyes. So they're really nice, bubbly treat. If your family is a fan of sports drinks, do know that most sports drinks, in general, they're overused unless you're exercising for more than an hour or are sweating quite a bit. Really, water is enough. But if you're going to go on a longer hike or do something sporty and you're going to sweat a lot, then maybe it is okay to do some kind of electrolyte replenishment. My absolute favorite is to do unsweetened coconut water with a little bit of tart cherry juice or your favorite kind of juice and a pinch of salt. That actually hits all of the electrolytes that are found in a sports drink without any added sugars or dyes. Here are a couple of quick breakfast ideas that you can stock up on. So whether you're driving and packing food in a cooler, or you're going to hit up the grocery store when you get there, it doesn't have to be complicated or fancy and to be healthy. And same with lunch. Lunch doesn't have to be complicated. Most kids are running around in the sun anyway and just need some quick and easy finger foods. So bread with peanut butter and jelly, or deli meat, or roll up some deli meat and dunk it in hummus. It doesn't have to be difficult. A lot of our kids love things to be cut up small and not mixed and not touching, so you can accomplish that a lot of different ways. And finally, dinner. Whether you're staying in an Airbnb or staying in a condo or staying with friends, or even some hotels have grills, so you can grab some healthy things to toss on the grill, pair it with some potato chips and cut up fruit and veggies. Maybe you can visit your grocery store salad bar for a couple of things that are already chopped up, and you have a healthy meal in minutes. One of my favorite tips is to make sure that you do have something that feels like a treat available. A lot of candy has tons of sugar and dyes, which, as we mentioned earlier, can set you up for challenging behaviors. So look for something that is approved that still feels like a treat, that avoids that as much as possible. So for example, Yum Earth is a great brand of candy that doesn't have any dyes in it. They have suckers and things like that. And Good Pop is a great brand of popsicles, and there are others too that don't have any added sugars or artificial sweeteners or dyes. So these are the kinds of things that you can pack with you when you drive, or you can buy when you get there so that you have some treats available so that it feels fun. And Becca, I think you had a good example about hockey games and treats.
And if you mean good example, this is just another, parenting fail. Learn from me. And if you guys, again, I've shared some of these stories before, and we do post previous webinars as well. But I've got a couple examples where sometimes the choices we make as parents set our kids up to fail rather than to succeed, I guess is the harsh way to state it. And one thing that we noticed with our son is we don't do soda very often at all with the kids, but on occasion we'd let them get lemonade when we go out for dinner. But what we would notice is every time my son would get lemonade, of course he would slam it before his food would come, and then my calm, chill, good kid would literally have a hard time staying seated in his seat. So he would get so squirmy, fidgety, wiggly, just so amped up from the sugar that we would go from having a relaxing family dinner to going to the mode of Drew, hold still, Drew, stop, Drew, you're in a restaurant, you can't do that. And so we realized that by saying no to the lemonade up front, which obviously doesn't always go over well, but that one no, move on, get over it, made for a more pleasant meal for the whole family. And so something as simple as just skipping the lemonade was a change in how we enjoyed going out to eat. But the story, Holly, that I think you're referring to is my husband does Y guides with the kids, and they were taking the girls to a hockey game. And the dad stopped off at a convenience store on the way to the hockey game and let the kids go nuts and get a bunch of snacks and treats at the convenience store. So they were getting, Skittles and soda, and a lot of the kids were getting multiple things, which, not unusual, not unheard of. These aren't bad parents. But what happened is this whole group of 8-year-old girls loaded themselves up on sugar and then went to this really exciting event as a group. Well, they got to the hockey game and lost their minds. So literally people around them were giving dirty looks and really not happy with them because the girls were shrieking and screaming. And you can imagine, again, a group of 7, 8-year-old girls shrieking and screaming is not fun for anyone. But again, what my husband sat back and realized is they set themselves up for this to happen. They allowed the girls to load up on sugar, on food dye, and then acted surprised when the girls lost their minds and were out of control. So my point in sharing this is, the decisions we make, and it's fun to allow the kids to have treats. It's fun for us to have treats. It's fun to go out for an ice cream cone. So on your vacation, just think it through. So maybe you say no to the lemonade at dinner, but then you do go out for ice cream as a family at the end of the night, and then you're going to walk back to the hotel to burn some of that energy. Sugar spikes energy, and it spikes it not in a positive way. So there's going to be less control over behaviors. So again, if you need your child to behave, to interact nicely, to be the best version of themselves, giving them something like Skittles that has food dye and sugar right before that isn't setting yourself up for success. And in the end, I feel bad for the kids when I, as a parent, do that to them. So when I would let Drew have a lemonade and then yell at him for his behavior, I've got to take some of that onus on me of, I know how it impacts him. And so again, it doesn't mean no treats, no snacks. It means think it through, balance it, don't go nuts with it, and choose your timing with it.
Perfect. I love that example. It's a powerful one. And I think there truly are more and more options available because consumers are looking for it. We're voting with our dollar. So it's becoming more and more common to find treats that really are pretty healthy and can set us up for fun and enjoying the experience without the compromise in behavior.
Yes. Holly, you shared a couple things with the frozen fruit. That's such a simple thing, but my kids love it. Frozen grapes we can't keep enough grapes on hand in the summer because they go to the freezer and just grab 1 or 2 grapes at a time. We bring them with us if we're going to the pool or in a cooler in the car. They don't stay frozen for long. clearly we need a better cooler. But a frozen banana, they also think is the biggest treat. And so, and they also, I mean, they're not deprived of like other things like ice cream, but you know, it's finding a balance to it. And so if they enjoy frozen grapes and a frozen banana, then we can do that sometimes and save the ice cream for an on occasion thing rather than an all the time thing. And getting them used to those things so that they enjoy that flavor and taste is good as well. So overall, what we're hoping you had takeaways on is, you know, understanding why a fun time like a family vacation can be stressful for both the parents as well as the kids, and especially if there's any sort of immaturity or complication in any aspect of development, it's really often going to seem amplified in these instances. And again, hopefully you had some tips from Holly on how to structure for nutrition to stay ahead of things and to be successful, to keep things on track, as well as thinking through schedule and timing and being in the moment for vacations. So hopefully every vacation has wonderful moments and moments of stress, but hopefully we're able to maximize those good fun moments here for your families this summer. Victoria, do you want to explain the follow-up?
Sure. Okay, so what we have for y'all today, I just wanted to make sure that we do a couple ending housekeeping items before we get into questions. We do have a really awesome, we're super excited about it, this downloadable guide for you all that you'll receive as a gift. We really appreciate you coming to the webinar today, as well as participating with us, asking your questions, and as part of that, we'll be sending this to you in an email. You'll receive this guide, as well as you'll receive a separate email that has the webinar recording. So thank you so much for coming. Our guide is called Summer Vacation Survival Tips, and we're just super excited to put some of the information from today into a guide that you'll have that you could take with you or read on your own time, possibly some more detailed information. What we really love about the back of this guide is it goes through some travel destination ideas. So if you haven't yet planned your vacation for the summer, or if you're feeling as though you're intimidated to plan a vacation based off of some struggles that your child has, we have outlined some common destinations that, and you know, some benefits to going on that destination type vacation, especially if your child is struggling with sensory issues or struggling to pay attention, struggling with mood and behavior, struggling socially, etc. As well as the gift with the Summer Vacation Survival Tips Guide, we are doing something a little bit unique this time around for webinar registrants and all those who attended by entering you all into a raffle for a $250 Visa gift card. We really wanted to give you this gift, you know, in order to spend a little bit further to make that vacation more memorable, more successful, more relaxing, whatever you had in mind for your family. And we'll be raffling off 4 of those given to the registrants. So please look out for contact regarding that if you're the winner. And next, what we're going to do is we're going to go through some questions. We have a lot of really awesome questions, and we have a little bit of time left, so I'm really excited to read them to you both. So number 1 from Emily. Thank you, Emily. She has 2 questions. First of all, vacations can be more stressful than a normal school day routine. My son gets up earlier when we don't have to be anywhere. I guess he's excited. So not necessarily a question, more a statement. I love this statement. I think a lot of parents can relate. Becca, do you have any tips for Emily?
It's so true. I mean, go with it. And, you know, off routine and everybody's sleeping in the same hotel room, I would bring something along for him to do quietly when he wakes up. So whether it's a new coloring book or a new sticker book or a new thing of, I hate slime, but Play-Doh, or, you know, whatever it is for your kid, if there's something that he can do that's that he doesn't know about until he wakes up, you know, you can set a rule of nobody is allowed to get up and get ready until a certain time so that the whole family isn't exhausted, because you can only go to Starbucks, you know, they usually don't open until 5 or 5:30, so you can only go so early. But that's cute and so real life. Yeah. Good luck.
Next question from Emily, which I love. Can I have that in writing somehow about the technology resulting in bad behavior? Is there some article or something?
Yeah, that's a great question. Off the top of my head, you know, there's Psych Central. If you go online, if you Google the negative effects of technology on childhood behavior, they have a great article that's just a super simple, very parent friendly. It's not getting into, you know, deep neurology to explain it. It talks a little bit more in terms of one of the downsides of technology is it's not teaching our kids how to figure out how to occupy their own time. And I see it with my own kids where I let Drew play video games for a little bit. And then for the next 3 days, I'm bored. I don't know what to do. When we take technology away, it forces them to get creative and figure out how to entertain themselves. And I think that's a lifelong skill that we all need. So it talks about how an increase in technology generates more in the way of negative behavior. That particular article doesn't go quite as much into you're going to see negative behavior because of the way it fatigues our brain, but it does still speak to some of why you see more negatives from technology. So it's a great article. But again, if you Google negative effects of technology on behavior, there's a million articles out there.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, next, my son suffers from motor tics, and doctors can't seem to tell me really what really to do. Is there any pointers to reduce the tics? Not relating to vacation necessarily, but I think this is a really great question for us to address today.
Yeah, that is a great question. And, you know, this is something that we see really frequently at Brain Balance. So sometimes you can see a tic as a side effect from medication. So that's always a first question to go back to your doctor to look at. But the other piece is all of our bodies crave movement and move, but when right brain is developed and doing what it's supposed to do, it inhibits movement and it inhibits thought. So I might have my brain racing with information, but when my development is where it's supposed to be, my brain will stop that thought, so I don't perseverate on a thought. It'll stop a movement, so my body isn't moving it's more than it's supposed to. So I look at a tic as a red flag to say, hey, that child's brain isn't inhibiting what it's supposed to. So that child is getting more movement than what they should. And again, we'll typically see the increase in thoughts go along with it as well. So that to me is a red flag of, again, you know, going back to the example of gaps and holes in development. Everything in development is a chain of events leading to positive outcomes. And so inhibition is a high level of development. So if we're not getting the proper level of inhibition in all areas, it's going to go back to something not coming together the way it should. So I would start with an assessment at Brain Balance, and that's going to show you where those gaps and holes in development are. And I'm such a big, in order to create an action plan for change, we've got to understand where the complication is coming from in the first place. And that's one of the things that I really love about our assessment is it's really thorough, really comprehensive, allowing you to understand why it is you're seeing the quirks or nuances or challenges in your child that you're seeing.
Awesome, thank you. And I also think I just wanted to mention that we are having a webinar about development in July. So look out for that webinar and feel free to send in any additional questions for that. I have a kind of a string of questions about diet and teens, Holly. So does all this apply to teens? How do we change bad teen food choices? Who don't want to change? And then there's a kind of a follow-up question there from the same parent. As parents, we have shown alternatives and choose healthy foods, but she always chooses non-healthy when there are those choices, particularly at parties, tends to do the opposite of what we ask. We hold treats for special times, but she gravitates towards carbs and candy.
Great question. I think a lot of parents can resonate with that question.
Agreed.
I think the first thing to consider is the expression force creates resistance. So we more have to draw our teenagers to us than to try and push them in the direction, because the more we are pushy, the more they're going to rebel. So nutrition really can help with just about anything. So with teenagers, you have to find out what motivates them. So are your teenagers concerned about their appearance? Do they have acne? Because good nutrition can help your skin glow, to lower inflammation and to reduce acne. Is your teenager concerned about their ability to focus in class or their ability to think through on their homework? Because, when you know, good nutrition can help with that too. Is your teenager interested in learning about other countries or traveling? Could you use cooking as a way to explore around the world? Are they dating? Are they looking for a way to make a special evening for a new friend or a new date? So I would really look at what motivates your teenager and use nutrition in that way. It also is really important to be demonstrating the behavior that you're seeking in your teenager. Kids of all ages, not just teenagers, are paying a lot more attention to what you do than to what you say. And then my last tip is there are some really great documentaries about healthy eating, which sometimes that speaks more to our teenagers. So one of them is Fed Up, and it's all about how much sugar is in our food system and the negative outcomes you can have from that. So Fed Up is the name of that documentary, and I'd really recommend everyone watch it, including our teenagers.
Awesome. Okay, follow-up question about teens for Rebecca. My teen hates going out of town. Never realized it could be related to any of these topics. She says she'd rather stay at home. Maybe it's too much stimulation. We didn't realize, question mark.
Yeah, here's what's so interesting is so much more comes back down to development than what we think. And so it's so easy to say, I don't know, to blame things on behavior or not the right curriculum, but again, healthy development sets us up for success and all these things. One of the things that we see is when we have a healthy, well-developed right brain. And again, this is a bit of an oversimplification, but right brain loves doing things that are new and different. So kids that really don't want to do things new and different, they don't want to explore, they don't want to push boundaries, they need things to be the same, they need structure, they need repetition. That can be a red flag that maybe there's great healthy development in lots of areas of the brain, but if they're less flexible and fluid, that's a red flag that there might be some areas of concern in part of the brain. And absolutely what can go along with that is if it's more stressful. Again, we all assume that you perceive stress the same way I do. The system that is more immature in development perceives things as stressful that you and I don't. And so and stress is taxing. I always give the example of if I were to drive to the beach on a beautiful day, it's a 2-hour drive, it's no big deal. If I were to drive 2 hours on a day where it was dark and it was pouring rain and it was gusty, I could do that same drive, but I'm going to feel different when I arrive. I'm going to be tense, I'm going to have a headache, I'm going to be crabby, I'm probably going to want a glass of red wine, is the honest answer. And that's the difference in me doing something feeling stressed versus not feeling stressed. So we have to remember that a lot of times the situations we put our kids in are causing them to feel like they're driving in a storm when they're not. And so that's going to bring out frustration, irritation, it's going to have an impact on their system. There's wear and tear there. And so, maybe it's a matter of visiting with your teen to say, is there a vacation that does sound good to you? Maybe a really calm, quiet something would be good. Maybe they're really not comfortable with change. And again, that to me is a red flag to take a closer look to say, okay, why is that? And is there something that we can do about that so it doesn't hold them back going forward?
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much. So at this point, we don't really have any further questions. If you could just move on, Holly, to the locations page. So I just wanted to encourage you all at brainbalancecenters.com/locations/ please visit our website if you want to inquire it to your local center. If you have any additional program related questions or questions about who we help and what we do at Brain Balance, please feel free to reach out to your local center because you can talk more personally with them about any struggle your family has and find out if Brain Balance is a good fit for you. Again, we have another webinar coming up next month that's going to be really focused heavily on milestones and development and when to worry. So please look for that email as well as the follow-up emails regarding today's webinar. Thank you so much for attending. You will receive that guide, summer vacation survival tips, as well as be entered into a raffle to win a $250 gift card. There are 4 of those. We really hope that those winners get to put that money directly toward your vacation with your family this summer. Again, thank you so much for attending, and we hope to hear from you soon.
Thanks, Victoria. Bye, everyone.